Thank you so much, JP, for all that orientation, and welcome to the second live session. I'm so glad to see many of you back here for another round of our introduction to engaging with Wikipedia. As JP said, this session is recorded, so you could revisit it live or in the recorded version after this. And for anybody who's not able to get to the live session, it will be available that way. But I really encourage to try as hard as you can to get here, because there's so much wonderful interaction that goes on in chat while we're here together live, so it's a really different experience. Again, this is the project team. Everybody is, well, I was going to say everybody's in one room. That's not true. Monica and Mercy and Jennifer Peterson and myself are all here in the room. Dale is at his desk providing tech support, and Marilee is in San Mateo joining us remotely. We also have a special guest presenter today, Janos Magai, and we'll be hearing from him later, so really appreciating his contribution. He's also the subject of one of the Librarians Who Wikipedia articles on WebJunction. And we have this wonderful host of Wikipedia guides. I want to emphasize they are volunteering their time and have been interacting in the forums and providing their expertise, and just really, really appreciate that they are willing to dedicate the support to all of our learning as we move through this course. Agenda for today, we're always going to have a lot to cover in the agenda, but hopefully we are scaffolding the learning in such a way that we all have a very confident exposure to Wikipedia and then can move forward into more advanced topics later in the course and engage with confidence. So I have just a few housekeeping notes before we plunge into today's content. One, just want to emphasize that there is a wide range of experience in our people who are participating in this course, starting with real novices, and I will put myself in that bucket, and I am learning right along with you, and then ranging up to people who've had a fair amount of experience, and then of course our Wikipedia guides who are quite well versed in engaging with Wikipedia. So it's a wonderful opportunity for us all to support each other. There's some opportunities for mentorship from those who are a little bit more experienced, but just encouraging everyone to try to remember when you all were novices and keep that sort of fresh beginner mind when you're supporting those of us for whom this is really a new experience. And as I said before, we are intending to scaffold the learning so that our engagement feels natural and comfortable when we get to the point of actually stepping in more deeply. A couple of notes about chat. If chat is too busy and distracting, you do have the option to close the chat window. Just X that window out and you won't see a bit of it. And then another in chat too, as much as you can, please try to stay on the topic. So because chat can get going so fast and furious, if people are introducing a lot of off-topic, it's just another level of distraction. A note about the discussion groups. There are a couple of questions that came over last week about how do you find your group. You actually will only see your own group. Only the administrators see all the groups, the administrators and the guides, but you will only see the group you're assigned to. So you just go right into that forum that will be there on the course page in each section. And just a reminder, please add your Wikipedia username to your WebJunction profile. It's a way that we can connect your WebJunction profile with your Wikipedia existence, and just a reminder that your Wikipedia user page is your public message to everyone in the Wikipedia community and beyond, and that's different from your WebJunction profile, which is really only visible to those who have WebJunction learning accounts. So a little bit of difference in your exposure there. And yes, it is really, I think it's very healthy to have a range of expertise. So we're going to do a quick interactivity. That's another way of taking the pulse of where people are right now. And for this, we're going to give you permission to use the annotation tools, and I see people are already finding we're using the check box here, or the check mark, which you find in that open square, not the colored square, but the open square, the little drop-down menu to the right, and choose the check mark entry in that menu. And if you want to practice checking here, you are welcome to do that. And okay, it looks like we're getting a lot of check marks, and I love people just always inevitably get wild and crazy with their check marks. Okay, so I will ask you to withhold, restrain, and just a reminder that when you use the arrow tool, it has your name on it. So that may be significant. I'm going to move us to the next slide, so if you please withhold your annotations for this minute. And what we would like to hear from you is how was creating your Wikipedia user page? And the reason we're using check marks is you can check anonymously. So if you found it very difficult and you don't want us to know who found it difficult, that's fine. But just kind of gauging how that was, because we really threw you into the deep end into what was your first introduction to editing, and gave you a tutorial, so hopefully that was straightforward enough. I think once you actually do it, it's not that scary. But if you did have any difficulties with it, and I have little hesitant squares over in the difficult end, if you had any difficulties, please don't hesitate to reach out to those of us. Dale Musselman is probably the best person to give technical support, but any one of the project teams can help guide you through that process, because we really want you to feel comfortable. Mercy provided a link to that tutorial, and it looks like, okay, Carol, you put your name on it. You haven't started yet. That's okay, but really encourage you to do that, because this is a little baby step into editing. And it also, this is your public face. This is how the Wikipedia community will first get to know who you are. And we will be talking a little bit later about maybe embellishing your user page and your personal presence there. Great, okay, well, it's great. It looks like the vast majority of you found it anywhere from easy to halfway, halfway easy. So great, okay, well, let's move on. We'll turn off the annotation and dive into our topics for today. Wonderful discussions in the forums. Thank you, all of you, for your thoughtful participation in the forums. We asked you to discuss your impressions of the Wikipedia 5 pillars and how it may or may not have changed your perception of Wikipedia as a resource. We found really, I don't want to say necessarily consensus, but we found really strong agreement that understanding the 5 pillars really enhanced your appreciation of the structure of Wikipedia. I see these as the backbone for engagement with Wikipedia, and just knowing about them, and I heard this echoed in many, many comments, just knowing about them really reinforces your appreciation of the resource. I'm going to be quoting from the forum discussions because you all said it much better than I can. These are all anonymous, so don't worry, I won't put anybody on the spot. But really appreciated this. Somebody said, I didn't realize that these pillars existed, so having them highlighted is very helpful. It will help me in conversations that I have both internally and externally about Wikipedia. So that's a huge first step, if you can talk more confidently about Wikipedia. And then I love this one. The pillars almost seem too simple to work. Very, very cogent observation, and we're going to look at the pillars one by one in light of your comments and discussions about them. So the first one, it's an encyclopedia, and we heard last week about the encyclopedic nature of Wikipedia, that it's a tertiary resource drawn from authoritative secondary sources, and in addition, it is a community, there's community behind it, and it is social, and it is open. encyclopedia. I think the biggest sort of point of discussion around this first pillar had to do, and I admit I didn't do any kind of statistical analysis, but my sense is that most of these questions came from people who are in an academic library environment or have a role as a historian or an archivist, and I actually have one of the quotations from somebody who's an archivist. She said, "I still can't quite get my head wrapped around this concept of Wikipedia's emphasis on only secondary resources. I still don't get the opposition to original research." So I think one of the guides wrote a very cogent response to that. So I'll quote this person who says that academic writing can be quite different from writing for Wikipedia. Academic writing uses primary sources to draw conclusions and may include original research and synthesis of sources. So those of you who are very familiar with doing that kind of writing are maybe the ones who are having the most difficulty with this. But he goes on to say, Wikipedia has this policy of no original research and no synthesis. And I think of Wikipedia as a summary journal article surveying the field using existing scholarship. So if you keep that sort of as your banner, I think that will support how you move forward when you get to the point, if and when you get to the point of actually writing for Wikipedia. Okay, neutral point of view. This one elicited the most comments, the most commentary. I see this, and I love these quotations. For one, I take the same position as a librarian. My goal is to provide accurate information to patrons, not give them my opinion. So I think that's a good guiding light. And then I love this one that, and I'll give the entire quotation, although the pursuit of neutrality or objectivity is a noble one, it really is a mythical creature that is often chased but never caught. There is no such thing as an unbiased piece of writing, no matter how hard you try. Even unconscious decisions such as word choice can be biased. And we will be hearing more today about word choice. That's a really critical piece of editing and writing for Wikipedia. This also brought up a lot of issues around adequate representation and diversity in Wikipedia, which is a deep topic. We will be exploring that more in future sessions, so I don't want to go into great detail now, but I think one of the responses really kind of captured a good way to summarize that here for now without going into the deep end of that. So this says that the neutral point of view is really critical for tertiary resources. I agree that we all have our biases. It is impossible not to. Wikipedia itself is biased in coverage because of the lack of diversity in its editorship. However, striving to overcome bias, meeting it head-on, being aware of our own point of view, and then presenting multiple sides of an argument or ways of thinking about a topic are good steps to reduce bias. That said, there are numerous examples of bias in articles. That's one of the reasons why I'm here. We can do better. And I think that sums it up so beautifully. It is I think the wonderful nature, and this gets into the next pillar, but that anybody or so many people can edit that you really start to increase that diversity and add enough more opinions or points of view that really start to balance out and create this neutral point of view. So really, it's a beacon to strive for, and we all recognize that we have inherent bias, but I think it's a good guiding light. Okay, number 3, a lot of appreciation that Wikipedia is a free to use resource for ourselves and for our patrons. Some questions, I think in particular, questions came up very specifically about using quotations, and this also relates back to that no original research and the number 1 pillar. These are all kind of intersecting. But there was a misconception that came up in at least one of the forums, so I want to make sure we clear up here today, and that was, and I'll just I'll quote this person's comment that said, I have a hard time with a specific bit of the third pillar. It mentions that any quote, even properly cited, is plagiarism in a Wikipedia article. In the spirit of copyright law, I know this is not plagiarism. So I just want to clear that up, and I'm going to ask Monica if she could address that really briefly.
Hi, everyone. That's a great question, and I believe that misunderstanding came out of the way that the Wikipedia Essentials tutorial phrased and summarized this pillar. And that is, there was an omission there, which is that a quote, even if it's attributed, or a content, even if it's attributed, does not belong in a Wikipedia article, and that's if it doesn't have quotation marks, and if it's a long and big piece of writing. So it's not useful to the encyclopedia to simply copy and paste the beginning of a chapter with no quotation marks as the beginning of a Wikipedia article just because you put a citation at the end that it came from that book. And this comes up because in the past people have copied and pasted from references, not including them in a useful or meaningful way in the body of the article, but have just copied and pasted them and maybe put a sloppy reference at the end. So that's where that comes from, but what you're absolutely right about is that, of course, quotations are welcomed in Wikipedia articles, and if you do look at the Wikipedia policy and guideline page on plagiarism, you'll find within the lead of that article a lovely quote from the University of Cambridge that I think shows you the proper and welcomed way to use direct quotations when they're appropriate in articles.
Great, thank you. And all of these things, we can continue discussion in the forums. That's what those are for, and it's really, I'm just kind of glancing at discussion going on in the chat. There is so much nuance and complexity to Wikipedia. I think we're beginning to see that a wider and fuller picture, that the discussion and the back and forth is a really healthy part of participating in this resource and this activity. So pillar number 4, really, I mean, pretty much wide acceptance and appreciation of this. I think generally thankfulness that Wikipedia chose to include this as one of 5 pillars, so really keeping this also as a guiding principle. And I'll just read this quotation because I think it's in part on the slide, but the full quotation. I also like how the pillars set the expectations for good behavior and respectful participation while also operating under the assumption that users will meet those expectations. Both its democratic nature and the assumption of good intent on the part of the user resonate with our work as librarians. And now the 5th pillar, this also generated a lot of discussion. Notice that it doesn't say no rules, it says no firm rules, and I think that flexibility is the essence of this, this particular one. One of the comments was, I do think that all the documentation stands in opposition to Wikipedia Pillar 5. If there are no rules, then why do we need documentation out of our ears? Good question. Another person said, I appreciate the flexibility of this pillar, and it's pointing to the idea that things change over time. It also gives a feeling of acknowledging the human element of a consensus-based encyclopedia that is made by many different people working together. Yes, I think that nails it. It is the nature, and the flexibility is actually, I think, a real strength of this, that it allows, it doesn't set anything that's rigid and acknowledges this change over time and the evolving nature of the resource. I just want to give one example of when this flexibility might be engaged. This is also from one of the comments in the forums. This person says, the times I have seen this in play have to do with biographies and notability. So there's been a lot of work to improve the number of biographies written about women. These push the boundaries of notability, and we're going to hear more about that today, from the perspective of some people because there might be less written in traditional sources about them. So I think that's an excellent example when you want that flexibility to stretch the rules or create opportunities to add diversity that may actually need to flex those rules a little bit. So yes, it's a paradox. I think it's a good skill for us all to be able to hold a paradox. We have rules, and then we have flexibility in how we apply those rules. So this goes back to levels of engagement. I just loved this quotation. So just noting there's some shyness about getting started with Wikipedia for those of us who are real novices. So this, I just love this, I love this. I'm not sure what to expect from this course. It reminds me of wading into the ocean and wondering how deep it will be after the next step. And I think we're getting a clue that there are some deep pockets of Wikipedia, but we're all bravely wading forward. Some people noted that they had experiences with Wikipedia in the past and encountered stumbling blocks, and these included things like previously having to use the Wikicode, HTML and Wikicode editor. We now have what Wikipedia calls the visual editor. I've always called it a WYSIWYG editor. So that block has been addressed. But then also encountering other rules and jargon, and I think just basically not understanding the nature of the resource, like what edits are acceptable and how you connect with the community and what are these issues relating to original research. That's exactly why we're here in the course. We want to build that understanding of Wikipedia and its editing community to help all of us be successful in whatever way we decide to engage with Wikipedia. So I'm going to wrap us up here with Marilee Prophet posted these rules in her discussion group, and I thought they were so wonderful I want to share them with everybody because not everybody could see them in the forums. That it's just, I think these are real, and I was just noting there are 5 rules here. 5 seems to be a common popular number for rules. So we have 5 pillars of Wikipedia, we have Ranganathan's 5 laws of librarianship, and now we have Marilee's 5 rules for engaging with Wikipedia. So really wonderful. Yes, don't worry, you can't break it. I learned something new about small edits, that people who engage with Wikipedia and just do tiny edits are referred to as gnomes, and gnomes are appreciated. And that's a level. If you want to just stay being a gnome, that is a valuable service that actually contributes to the strength of the resource. Yes, Wikignomes rule. And I love this, there's no ownership of articles. That reflects that one comment, like, I hope I can let my ego go. Yes, you do need to let your ego go when you're doing this kind of collaborative editing. And there's no one correct way to do things, so that refers to that real flexibility of the rules, which are really more guiding principles. And when in doubt, ask yourself, is what I'm doing making Wikipedia a better place? There can be a lot of discussion behind that, but I think discussion is one of the essential qualities and virtues of Wikipedia. So again, thank you all for your wonderful contributions to make this discussion really rich, and I'm looking forward to what you'll be talking about next week. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Monica to take us forward.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Betha. I'll just echo that it's been so exciting to see all the levels of engagement and conversation take place in the course space. And now we're going to be diving into a deeper look at some of the principles and the ways they play out in Wikipedia, extending out the 5 pillars. So we've talked about Wikipedia as a tertiary reference source and all of the complexities that raises about questions on what counts as a secondary reference or a primary reference. And one of the things that Wikipedia editors are constantly doing is navigating what this notability means and how that translates into an article that's written in a neutral point of view. So that's what we're going to talk about in this next section. And I think a big question that's often asked is, should this topic, fill in the blank here, have an encyclopedia article? What can have an encyclopedia article, and how do you prove that, or how do you show that it demonstrates it meets the qualifications? And so I'm just going to point out right up here, actually, you'll see these throughout. This is a shortcut that I will be putting throughout my presentation, and this is a Wikipedia shortcut that will just quickly take you to the page that I'm referring to, and Wikipedians will use these shortcuts in conversations they have with each other, a kind of shorthand to reference what they're talking about and why they're saying it. So knowing this will help you be a savvy Wikipedia reader and help you understand what you can do and how you can use these shortcuts to make edits. So that was just a pause there to give you some information about shortcuts. So back to the question, what topic should have an encyclopedia article? As we've talked about, Wikipedians are not necessarily concerned with the quote-unquote inherent truth or inherent objectivity of a topic. They're concerned with the independent, verifiable secondary references, and that is what helps guide to make a tertiary reference. Wikipedia is not everything that exists, and libraries, too, may be very familiar with having to make choices about what to include and what not to include based on certain kinds of criteria. Inclusion isn't about tabloid fame or notoriety or even how much something is loved. It's about its representation in these secondary references. So to give you a chance to think through that, let's look here at this page on library. Library as a concept and a topic is a very notable topic. It's been written about by a wide range of sources that are independent from the functioning of libraries. And of course, libraries themselves are creating knowledges about what they do and how they do it. And so you'll find that the article in Wikipedia on library is very rich and deep. But it does raise the question of what individual libraries, what would make them notable to have an encyclopedia article? And this is a question that's come up. So I wanted to offer you the opportunity to, in chat, share, based on what you understand about how Wikipedia works so far, what would be needed to establish encyclopedic notability for this library here to have an article? And this library here that I'm referencing, Roseville Public Library, is the library that's just outside of Detroit, Michigan, in Roseville. And I'll explain to you why I chose that one in a little bit. But I want to give you a chance here to throw into chat now what would be needed. And let's see here, we're having some responses come in. We have national media attention, maybe an award, a major event, a library that has special collections, something significant, a unique architectural design, an important reference, historical significance, articles, independent articles written about it, a unique collection, widely known by other librarians, secondary sources. Thanks for all of these. I'm just reading them out loud as they're coming in, and it seems like many of you are understanding what this is. So I'm going to see. We had one who says independent articles are written about the library. Several independent sources have written about it, and that is exactly right. Several independent sources have written about this library, maybe for its unique architectural design, maybe for its special collections, maybe for a major event, but several over time that establishes its notability. So 15 minutes of fame is not, won't fulfill the notability criteria for Roseville Public Library. And these need to be articles, for example, secondary sources. And that might be a newspaper article, it might be a book, it might be a radio broadcast coverage, something that's unique and separate from the library. Great, great responses. I'm putting up a shortcut here, and this is for guidance on how to establish the notability of organizations in particular. And one of the things that Wikipedians talk about is that there's many organizations may want to have an encyclopedic article, but there's no kind of notability that comes from maybe being associated with a very famous person, so no inherited fame in that way. And simply by existing is not criteria for notability. And that in many ways ensures that Wikipedia is a curated reference source, a summary of secondary sources. It doesn't include everything. It's not a phone directory. It's not a catalog of everything. Wonderful. Thank you for all of these fantastic responses here. I'm glad that I've got you thinking a little bit in putting on your Wikipedian hat and thinking like a Wikipedian. I want to draw your attention here to the fact that we emphasized last week, which is that Wikipedia articles are in a constant state of becoming. So seeing an article on Wikipedia, it may be notable, but it may be underdeveloped. And so I've included this article here, and I'll talk a little more about it as we go on, as an example of a topic that is in many ways notable, but the article itself is not fully developed. And so the notability of this topic isn't decided by the state of an existing article. It's, as you probably know, it's decided by the existence of secondary sources, and libraries have those. So it's not about what's already in Wikipedia, it's what could be in there. And finally, I want to now talk about, once we've decided that an article should belong in an encyclopedia like Wikipedia, how do you achieve this mythical creature of neutral point of view in doing that? How do you bring out all of those independent secondary references and include them in an article in a meaningful way, considering, as many of you have raised, that everyone has inherent biases. Everyone looks at the world from the place that they're in it and the accesses that they have to it. So what can Wikipedia do to ensure that there's a neutral point of view in the way that the article is written? And this is where I want to talk a little bit about conflict of interest. When you're evaluating a Wikipedia article, it's not necessarily all that useful to evaluate the authority of the contributor, and that's because it's a unique setup. People don't join Wikipedia wearing their expert hats. Anyone can join in theory, and so editors evaluate other editors based on the ways in which they interact and what they contribute. So it's really a comment on the content, not the contributor, as one of the Wikipedia guidelines suggests. And so this means you need to pay close attention to understand if there's somebody who's participating who's really pushing their point of view. Sometimes people call that POV pushers, or if they're coming in and aiming to represent an organization or a political figure or a movement that they're feeling very strongly about. You look to their language to see how are they doing that. And that's really where you would make a judgment about the neutrality of an article and the success in achieving that neutrality. Now, I did just want to mention briefly that there are cases when a username can point to a very clear conflict of interest by a Wikipedia editor. There was a long case that happened with the Church of Scientology constantly editing articles related to the church. And over time, those IP addresses associated with the Church of Scientology were blocked because they consistently broke the rules and inserted deleted content that was criticisms of the church and so on. More recently, last April, there was a case of a user named Burger King Corporation that added in a lot of promotional content to the article on Whopper, the Whopper burger, right before a major advertising campaign that drew on the Wikipedia article. And so that's a case where not only is there promotional language in the content, but the username is a strong indicator that there may have been a conflict of interest by that editor in adding information to the encyclopedia, and it wasn't in the best interest of the encyclopedia. So that's a case where that IP address and that user were blocked from making further edits to those pages. What I'd like to do now is invite you to do another chat activity and see if you can share examples that you have of what might be this kind of inappropriate language. What's a value Latin term, a weasel word, a promotional tone, or just non-neutral language. Share in chat with us that language is. Oh, and I see, while you're doing this, I'm going to address a question. Someone asked me, when will I share information about Roseville Public Library? And you can sit tight. That information is going to come at the end of this presentation. So I am teasing you with what is to come. So what are some words to watch here? Most people believe that's great. The best ever, yes, adjectives, adverbs, generally regarded, generally speaking. The passive voice, I think, is a great indicator. Yeah, these adjectives about how something is or might be that all people believe. Yes, words to watch would be like it's often reported, people say, but also there's bias in words like tragically, fortunately, essentially, interestingly, because these give the reader some suggestion of how they should be viewing this fact, and it's very subtle. Generously, horribly, exactly. Yes. Thank you for all of these fantastic chats here. This is great. Okay. I just want to emphasize that when we talk about what gets included in the encyclopedia and the criteria for that, and then how you evaluate neutral point of view, what I've aimed to do is just give you a few parameters on how this plays out for Wikipedians. And that the questions that you've been raising, the paradoxes and the kinds of cans of worms that get opened by this, these are issues of concern for Wikipedians too. And the guidelines and policies around discussion and consensus are how Wikipedians have sought to overcome some of these. It's through coming to a consensus and a civil discussion. And that means that really your actions on Wikipedia and the actions that take place in the articles speak louder than the words themselves. It's what's happening in those spaces. What I'm going to talk about now is how to define and assess article quality in Wikipedia articles. And as you've learned already, you know, we have the 5 pillars of Wikipedia, and then there are content policies that are deepening and summarizing these pillars. And many of you have commented that, you know, these raise some difficulties, but they have their origins in aiming to prevent giving undue weight to fringe theories. And so this is a space where it's aiming to summarize what's already been at play and not having fringe theories or conspiracy theories gain any momentum in Wikipedia spaces. And this dates back to the policies that were under development in the early 2000s. And if you go to the core content policies pages, you can read a little more about this history. There's a special emphasis that's given in Wikipedia to the biographies of living people. And I wanted to give you a chance for a minute to brainstorm in chat, why would it be that biographies of living persons, are often given extra attention on Wikipedia? I'd like to hear from you why that might be. Yes, exactly. So I'm just going to take what one of you said, which is we don't want to harm living people. So the aim is to not hurt people by having a biography of them. So it's important to really take care when writing about someone. And Wikipedians will very carefully monitor pages that are added to or that are new, that are about living persons, in order to prevent harm to others and protect the privacy of people. I want to now go back to the example that we used in the first week of Franz Kafka, and I pointed out to you then that the article on Franz Kafka is a featured article. It's really Wikipedia's best. But, of course, it demonstrates all of the elements of a high-quality article. But unfortunately, not all articles on Wikipedia have reached this state. So what I want to help you do by learning some of the signs and signals in the Wikipedia community is assess articles and their use and their reliability when they only meet some of this criteria. So what I'm going to talk to you about now is 6 ways that you can use the signs and signals of Wikipedia to evaluate articles that aren't quite perfect, that haven't reached what you would describe as a professional level. But simply because not articles have reached that doesn't mean that you should, ignore them or throw them all out. Nor necessarily does it mean that only going to the references is a useful way of understanding them. So we're going to talk through 3 examples today, and I'll just touch on each of them on how you might analyze those articles using tools, signs, and signals from the Wikipedia community. So the first is actually assessment class. Other Wikipedians have assessed Wikipedia articles' level of development. So you can see up here featured articles, and their level of importance is how crucial they are to an encyclopedia. This is an important thing to look to, but it's just a starting point, because not all articles have an updated assessment, and many articles are unassessed or haven't been assessed in a long time. So you can look to the assessments as a starting point. And we have a pro tip from Janos on how you can change your settings in your personal Wikipedia username to make it so that article grades appear on every page automatically. And we've just sent out in chat, or we'll be sending out in chat, how to turn on this notification in your username. But what this gives you is what you can see here is when an article is assessed or not. So, for example, I was curious about the playground game Cat's Cradle. I wanted to learn a little bit more about the history, and I wanted to remember how you do the string with your fingers. So I looked to Wikipedia, and I found that it's an unassessed article. So what can I do? How can I assess what the development of this article? Well, here's where you can look to the ways that the article has been flagged or discussed. And templates are key here for looking at the strengths and weaknesses of an article. So if we go over to the Eid Mubarak article as another example, someone has added a template that says this article has multiple issues. It possibly contains original research, and it needs additional citations for verification. So what I'll do is I will look to see if there's any additional content that's been added since these templates were added to verify that they're current. And you can go to the History tab on an article and compare versions from when the templates were added to the current version. Because sometimes new content is added, but the templates aren't removed. With the Cat's Cradle article, I found there was no grade and there was no template. So what else can I use to assess the quality? You can look to the talk to find strengths and weaknesses. And if you go to the revision history, you can actually view some excellent information in the revision history statistics that will show you how many people have contributed to the article and over what time. So in this article, most of the content was created in around 2005, and a small number of editors added content, and most of the contributions were made by one editor. This is very small, but if you go and see this yourself, you'll see the menu of options for understanding the article development is available in revision history statistics. So what I see with this article is that there's few contributions and there's been few new contributions made. Then I look at how stable an article is over time. Is this something that's a topic that's undergoing a lot of conversation? Is it a controversial content, or is it something that's relatively uncontroversial? With an article like climate change, you would look to see if there is a lot of changes that are happening in the article because it's very relevant to current events. And in articles such as climate change that are around controversial topics, often you'll see a lock sign. There are different kinds of locks, and these are signs of protection. New editors or editors who don't have a certain number of edit counts or haven't participated in the project for very long, either less than 4 days or maybe less than 30 days, and haven't kind of proven through the ways in which they're interacting in the encyclopedia that they're there in good faith, the article will be locked so that they can only make contributions to the top page of that article to suggest new kinds of content. Then you can look at the breadth of the article. Breadth. Let's see if I can say this correctly. And how embedded it is in the internet ecosystem. So in Wikipedia, breadth for me isn't always about what's actually in the article, but where can you go from there? So if I look at the climate change article, you can assess how the article is organized and where the in and out links are to it to see where might somebody go with this and where can they go. How organized is the article and what does it include? Is it comprehensive and well organized for someone to read? And the climate change article is incredibly well organized. So you can see many ways in which this article has quite a few strengths. Despite it, and if you look earlier, it's been a demoted good article, so it hasn't quite reached that potential because of the way it's been edited. So as a reader, where did I go from here? I found I was curious about global warming, so I clicked pretty much right away to the article on global warming so I could compare the differences between what the climate change article was claiming and what the global warming article was claiming. I then went back and looked at a white paper that summarized policy suggestions, and then found myself digging in deeply into resources for simple living. So I think you can evaluate how developed an article is by where it can take you and what's been added to it, so information seekers can go in many places. Of course, you also want to look at the diversity in references. In the Eid Mubarak article, there are only 2 references. They're poorly formatted and they take you to articles in UK daily papers. So this is not a very useful set of references. And in fact, this would potentially be a case where you wouldn't want to recommend that someone just go and look at the references to this article, because it doesn't take you to a very helpful place where you can learn more. The inline references that take you to a better page on Muslim holidays is actually quite useful, however. For the Cat's Cradle article, there were quite a few references, despite it not being updated in a long time. There was a diversity of books, academic books, websites, and also links to media that weren't dead links, but actually were live and could take you to what I was curious about, which is how do you use the string around your hands to play the game. So again, this was an unassessed article, and I found the references and external links were very useful for what I needed. The diversity in the references on the article on climate change, again, were very high quality and reflected a broad array of research that's been done about this topic historically. And finally, when you're evaluating Wikipedia, you can look at the authority of contributors. So again, as I mentioned, you're not necessarily looking at who someone is and who they say they are, because that may or may not be true, and there's no way of verifying that. What you're looking for is evidence of their good faith, and that's found in the ways in which they've made contributions in the past. You can also, this will also help you understand that despite being an encyclopedia that everyone can edit, there actually is hierarchies. There are some editors who have more permissions and more authority than others, but the cues for seeing this are very subtle. There are editors who have gone through a process of evaluation by their other editors to see if they've been worthy enough in their participation in the project to be given administrator privileges, which means they can delete articles, or they can surface articles that have been deleted in the past, and they can close discussions that are taking place. So knowing this will help you evaluate the authority of a contributor. Most Wikipedians who have been participating in the project for a long time will have very well-developed user pages where they list their interests, maybe any projects that they're working on, whereas IP editors who are not logged in and just using their IP address maybe are not there, haven't been participating for a long time, so one might look at their contributions with more skepticism. I also want to point out that there are robots on Wikipedia, and I say that with jest, but many of the edits that are made that protect the encyclopedia from vandalism or that help keep categories organized or flag particular pages for needing attention are not done by individual users themselves. They're done by automated scripts that have been developed and undergone review by the Wikipedia community as being useful to the purpose of the encyclopedia. So these are scripts, algorithms that Wikipedians have decided would be beneficial to have. And always a bot or a robot is noted by the word bot in their username. So you can find out if a change was made by a bot. And Bender the bot, I think, is one of the busiest bots on Wikipedia. So these are some of the strategies that can help you evaluate an article beyond looking at the content of the article itself. As Tolstoy has said, all happy families are happy in the same way. All Wikipedia articles that are excellent will demonstrate all of those excellencies in really the same way. But every unhappy article is unhappy in a different way. And so it's useful for you to know where to look to see what are the strengths of this article. Does it have strong references? Does it have an excellent embeddedness in the community? Was it a very contentious page? Has it been demoted? These are strategies you can use to see what are the strengths of this and what are the weaknesses. Now, I've just touched on here 3 articles that I analyzed, and I'd be happy to share with you and invite you to analyze them too, but you, and I'll preview for now, will be having an assignment to assess a couple of different articles than these. And so we can continue conversation about strategies, signs, and signals to evaluate Wikipedia articles in our course space. And I really look forward to doing that together with you. I want to end this portion of the presentation by saying that on Wikipedia there's always room for more voices, and there's always room for more contributors to come together. And one of your course mates in this course shared this photo that I think perfectly encapsulates what it is about Wikipedia, that even the most perfect article or photo caption can always be improved upon. And it also is a little humor too, that this is something that's fun for people to participate in, and Wikipedians are subtle, but they do have a lot of fun in doing what they do. Now, before we move on to our guest presentation by János Miki, I wanted to invite you to raise any questions or look to my colleagues to see if there's any questions that need to be addressed right now about the massive body of content, the information that I've just given you, knowing that this is just a taster into how you can evaluate the millions of English Wikipedia articles in various states of development.
Well, there have been a few questions coming up, and thank you so much to our experts in the group who are responding to the more technical questions. So in particular, Marilee and Janos have given some very good answers to questions. I think a couple of things to clarify before we go on. One is the value of contributing via the talk pages. So, and I think what I heard is you recommending if you are new and you don't have this edit history that sort of validates your presence in the community, is it better to just make suggestions on the talk page as opposed to going into the article, making edits, and then noting in the talk page that you
That's such a great question, and thank you for asking that. There's two times when it's really important to contribute via the talk page first. And the first is if you'd like to make a suggestion to a page that's locked or protected, that's on a highly trafficked page, that's controversial, and you don't intend necessarily to become a part of the Wikipedia community, then you can definitely post on the talk page and other editors will take note there. In part because on some pages that are locked, editors who make contributions that are not valuable may be blocked, and this is to prevent vandalism. On the other hand, if you do see yourself as someone, and I hope this counts everyone who's a part of this course, to participate, the barriers to getting past those protections are pretty low. So you need to have made 10 edits over 4 days to get past that semi-protection on many article pages. And then it's really about if you're feeling confident that what you'd like to add to it is going to be useful. Now, there are some really, really controversial topics where that actually there's an even higher level of blocking new contributions, and you need to have made 50 edits over 30 days. But that would be for topics like abortion. I think that President Trump's page is also protected that way, in part because of their popularity and the various opinions that people have that they want to insert into there. And the aim is to make sure that at any given time, someone who's going to that page will find what's most accurate. But in terms of other pages, I think that it's very valuable to make a change and let people know about what you've done on the talk page and invite them into conversation. And we will talk more about how to do that in our next session when we're talking about editing.
Yes, we'll definitely be getting into more nuts and bolts of editing next week. I just want to appreciate this comment from Laura that these evaluation tips are so important for teaching students or anyone who uses Wikipedia about keeping their skeptic's hat on.
I'm so glad to hear that, yes. I think these are ways that you can help.
One other hopefully quick question. Maybe you can just reinforce, so there was a comment about the Cat's Cradle article that it only had 2 references, so why was it accepted? Why does it have a presence?
That's a great question. The Cat's Cradle actually had about 10 references, but the Eid Mubarak article had only 2 hyperlinks to these newspaper articles in the UK. As I've said before, Wikipedia is always changing, and the assessment criteria is changing. And as Wikipedia has gained prominence in the internet world, the barriers to entry for new articles are higher and higher because it's gained more authority, and editors are now in a position where they feel a lot of the content that's been developed by this, do-it-yourself community is really legitimate, wonderful encyclopedic content. So what that also means is that there are a lot of articles that maybe aren't notable or maybe need to be changed. Now, I looked and compared, for example, does Merry Christmas have its own article? Because that would be the Christian equivalent to Eid Mubarak, which is the greeting that's used around Muslim holidays. And in fact, what I found was that Merry Christmas has a very detailed section in the Christmas page that discusses ways in which that term has been used, its relationship to happy holidays, its relationship to season's greetings. It was fascinating to read, way more developed and rich than the Eid Mubarak article. actually was. And one might go, well, no one's been paying attention to this article. The top page is empty. No one's really done anything. A lot of the contributors haven't contributed in a long time. Maybe it needs to be merged with the Muslim holidays article and developed within that. And that's something that a Wikipedian can do. You can do. I found myself having a lot of difficulty to not make changes to these articles as I evaluated them. And if you go to, for example, the Cat's Cradle article now, you'll see that I ended up adding citations needed to a lot of the claims in there that seemed a little out there, and I just couldn't help myself. I'm there, and someone needs to know that this claim about Cat's Cradle being part of indigenous communities around the world is unverified. So now if you see that notation, you'll know, okay, that might be the case, but I know that it's not a verified claim in Wikipedia. So this idea that you can go in and improve it just by making contributions like using a template or using a citation needed is going to help others evaluate the veracity of that article. I hope that answered your question.
I think we're good, and I think now it's time to hear from János.
Yes, so I am delighted to introduce to you our guest presenter today, János McGee of St. Paul Public Library, and he's going to be talking to you about both his editing and his strategies for evaluating. And so I will let him take the mic now, and how do I pass the baton?
Oh, he's already got it.
He's already got it. All right, János, well I welcome you and look forward to hearing from you.
All right, can I be heard?
Yep, you sound great. Thanks.
Okay. The internet, sorry, my Wi-Fi just cut out. Can anyone else advance the slides for me?
Certainly,
Okay.
we will do that. All right.
Oh, here, I think I've got it back. Okay,
Oh, okay.
Hi folks, my name is János McGee, and I am a librarian in St. Paul, Minnesota. I work for St. Paul Public Library. And if any of you are anything like me, you can't pay any attention to anything else I'm saying until you understand what the heck is up with my weird name. So I'll just mention what that is. I'm half Hungarian on my mom's side, hence János, so it just means John, and Scottish on my dad's. And having the last name McGee led to a nickname pretty early on. So I'm officially MacGyver on Wikipedia. Does this sound any better?
Yeah, I think so. Imagine you're speaking to a room of 150 people.
Okay, I'll do what I can. It is a library that I'm in now. So, yeah, that's me. I'll briefly talk about my, here's my origin story and how I developed my superpowers. Actually, 11 years ago, I was at work, and yet another patron said something to me along the lines of, oh, all information is online these days. And I looked around, and I'm like, here I am in a building full of offline information. People can't assume that all information is online. There's a lot that's locked away in books, and a lot more that's locked away behind paywalls or in databases that you need to log into. But there's this perception. A lot of people assume enough information is online that they don't look for offline information or paywalled information. And I can't fight that, but I can do what I can in my own small way to help move more information to the online realm, because that's where people are looking for it nowadays. And obviously Wikipedia was the place to do that. It's one of the top 5 most visited websites, I believe. I think it's safe to say it is probably the most consulted reference work on the planet. So I decided then and there to just start contributing. And here I am 11 years later. So I started working on state parks here in Minnesota. Because I'm one of those rare geeks who likes to go outside too. So I started working there, and that was a great place to start, it turned out, because there's not too many other people working on that topic. So I know it's really common for people to start in Wikipedia and they immediately run into conflict with other users or get their edits reverted right away. I found a backwater nobody was working in, and I was just able to learn and grow and do it on my own and not step on other people's toes. And so I certainly encourage you all to find some little niche that you're passionate about that's underdeveloped on Wikipedia and maybe start working in that vein. And since then, I've gotten more involved in writing on National Register of Historic Places articles. And that has there's a little interesting thing to say there about notability. Many National Register sites are not nationally notable. Many have just local notability, but they have all been granted notability for the purposes of having Wikipedia articles about them, because to get on the National Register, there's a lot of documentation that is filed at the state and national level, and it tends to draw attention in newspapers when something's listed. So because by the dint of them getting on the register, there are these secondary sources about them, then there's enough, presumably, secondary sources about them to have articles. So that's kind of a double backflip, triple axle way that these have all achieved notability. And then the third area I've been involved in the last several years is in assisting institutions and museums and other libraries in leading Wikipedia events with the public. So shout out to Meg and Janice. I saw you on the list of attendees today. I've worked with you. So navigating Wikipedia's content policies as a reference librarian or any kind of library worker. We've talked about that earlier today. I'll just cover this briefly. So one, of course, is verifiability. And that should be easy enough for us. That's simply saying that most statements on Wikipedia, facts, should be tracked back through a citation to some reliable source. We try to do that in our professional work, so that one should be easy. And then NPOV, or neutral point of view. Again, that should be easy. We try to give information out in a neutral sense, and we don't give our own opinions there when we're giving that to a library user. And the third one here, NOR, no original research. That one, yeah, it's a harder hurdle to get over cognitively. And no one is saying that original research is bad for scholarly work. Quite the opposite. And here's a little call out from Wikipedia's official user guide on no original research. Original research is essential for scholarly work, but the point of scholarly work is to use primary resources to draw your own conclusions, to make syntheses and report that. But that's not what an encyclopedia is for. So an encyclopedia, whether it's World Book, Britannica, or Wikipedia, should be reporting what authoritative people have said in their secondary work, having drawn their own conclusions from the primary sources. So that's where Wikipedia is a tertiary work, and original research doesn't belong there. And just as an anecdote, I was once helping at a Wikipedia edit-a-thon, and a guy came in, and he was like, I figured it out. I spent 20 years researching tribal art, and I finally have a theory that pulls it all together, and I figured it out. How do I put it on Wikipedia? And I had to say to him, you can't put it on Wikipedia, because that's original research. If you have a great theory, that's great. You've done primary research, you've done original research, that's great, but you need to write articles and submit them to journals and get published. That's where you publish your new ideas. You don't publish them first in an encyclopedia. You know, his theory wouldn't get first published in the World Book Encyclopedia. He needs to publish it in journals and get attention, and then if other people accept it and that gets talked about in that corner of academia, then it would achieve notability, presumably, and then it could be on Wikipedia. But it doesn't debut on Wikipedia. So I'm going to go through some tips and tricks for how I assess a Wikipedia article. And I will go through these quickly because a lot of this is review from before, earlier today. So we saw the templates that flag articles, and those are nice and big and bold, and they're pretty easy to see. You know, you're also looking for strong writing. Does the first paragraph of the article synthesize it? Because that's an indicator of good writing. Is it clear? It's not overly wordy. There's neutrality in the tone. And you know, you're just glancing and getting a sense of the length of the article. If it's pretty long, clearly a lot of work went into it. But if it's poorly written or the citations are weak, you might assume that only one person has worked on this, and it hasn't really been crowdsourced into a better state. And as you go on and start doing some editing, there's a lot of little stylistic things that Wikipedia has decided on in their manual of style, and you'll start to become attuned to those. And let me do this quick. So one thing, the title of the article should be the first words in the lead paragraph, and the convention is to put those in bold. So this here is a snapshot of a newly created article, and I saw that it just missing a lot of the things that you expect to see in a more developed article. So the title wasn't in bold. It doesn't mention the nationality of this person. Gloria F. Ross was an American designer. It's pretty conventional. And New York City isn't even a wiki link. And the other one little subtle thing I'll clue you in on, one of the manual of style things is that the section headers should only be capitalized in the first word unless there's proper names mixed in there. So seeing the E, the L, and the E in this early life and education all capitalized says to me immediately this was written by a newer editor, and more experienced editors haven't passed through who would just fix that as a matter of course. And I certainly encourage people to just add content with citations and not worry about the formatting, because other people can come along later and fix that. But if you're seeing an article that doesn't have the formatting spruced up, that strongly suggests not a lot of people have passed through there yet. And then checking the citations. We talked about this earlier. Look for a variety of sources. So it's not all websites or not all articles from one nation's newspapers if it's a more international topic. Little things like that. And if a citation is used more than one, well, quick here, if you click on the little caret next to a citation, it jumps you up the page to where that citation is in the text above. And if the same citation is mentioned several times, then you get it lists them alphabetically, so you just have an A, B, C, D, E, and F, and you can click on any individual one of those to the page to see where it was cited. But if you see something that's cited a lot in an article, have a look. Is that a source that's a good one to be citing a lot or not? If there are dead links, there's usually a red flag that is a dead link. Also watch for bare, it's just plain old URLs in the citations. They should be formatted so you have an author, a publisher, a publication year. I mean, not every website has that, but that's another signal that the article's more developed, if the citations are more riced out that way. Then, as we've talked about, jump on the talk page, get a sense. Are people assuming good faith? Are there raging battles going on about whether sections belong in this article or not? Or is it pretty dull? A lot of talk pages don't have much going on. And that's a signal probably that the page is either okay or it's a backwater that no one's looking at. And then view history is also a really important skill. So when you're at an article, you've got the title here, and across the top, there's article and talk. And then over here is a very powerful tab called view history. And that is how you can view all the edits that have ever happened to any article ever. Wikipedia actually saves every iteration of every article from its beginning. And you can see that history take place. So you can assess how long has this article been on Wikipedia? How often is it edited? Has it not been edited in 2 years? How many people seem to be contributing to it? Are they constructed edits? And so this is going to be a little itty-bitty on most of your screens, but if you see an IP address on there, that was someone who wasn't logged in, either hasn't created a username or doesn't want to. Very often those are vandals doing problematic edits, and here's an IP editor down there, and the next edit was a bot that reverted possible vandalism. And vandalism happens to well-developed pages too. So having a page that was vandalized doesn't mean it's a bad article, but was the vandalism reverted? That's an important thing. I'm going to pick up the pace. You can click on a username and see their user page. Everyone has a talk page, and you can get a list of their contributions. So you can see kind of where they are. Do they have a body of authority here? Or are they like someone like this who's been warned 3 times for vandalizing and then was blocked indefinitely? So using, I use Wikipedia a little at work. I tend to try to, like any of you, would prefer to use more authoritative sources, books and databases, but it does have its strengths. It's great for pop culture, and it's great for no answers. So if someone wants to know, hey, was there a sequel to this? Or I want season 3, and I look on the Wikipedia article and say, oh, it was canceled after 2 seasons. There never was a season 3. So it's good there. It's good for lists of series order. And it's great for sort of categorical inclusion and hierarchies. I worked at St. Paul's branch that housed our car repair collection. And so we have people coming in looking for books on car repair. And they would have a specific make and model. And sometimes that particular book would be checked out. But I would often pop onto Wikipedia, and that would lay out very nicely. Most of the car articles are well developed. And I could find that, oh, that same engine was used in this other make and model of the same year. And so we could find a book that had the same engine as the car that they wanted to repair, and that was good enough. Other things Wikipedia is great about are well developed on Wikipedia: science, engineering, military history, sports, cars, trains, highways, definitional things. That's true enough. You notice there's kind of something in common that those have. They are certainly stereotypically male interests, and Wikipedia is not as strong about art, female artists, things like that. So that's where I'm excited to get more people involved in Wikipedia and helping out there and shoring up the gaps. So if you use Wikipedia for reference work, hopefully what we've discussed today will be useful in glancing over an article and thinking about, is this something I can use? So certainly I would never use Wikipedia on anything that has a hint of controversy. That's where I'm going to want to go to an authoritative published source. Also, where there are fringe viewpoints, often people who have some agenda push the hardest, and there are all these other great editors out there trying to keep things neutral, trying to keep things focused on the mainstream thought about a topic, but it's the people who have an axe to grind or an agenda to push who are more, who just don't give up. And the other folks finally can get sick of it and move on. So you want to be cautious for that. And then also, what are the stakes? If someone needs the next book in a series and that series list was wrong and I give them book 4 instead of book 3, nobody's going to die. If someone wants medical information, we go to our databases, we go to our books. So hope that gives some folks a bit more of a framework about how to evaluate articles, and I certainly encourage you to start doing some of your own edits. And the more you do that, the more you get involved in it, the better you have to quickly assess an article and see if it's useful. And I'm very excited to have more people in my profession get involved in Wikipedia, because we really have the same mission in libraries as we do on Wikipedia, and that's to get information freely to the people who want it. So I think it really behooves folks in our profession to get involved in this and to help shape it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janos, for taking time to explain to us. I just really applaud the work that you've done over the years and the ways that you've contributed to this and that you've shared it with our course participants today. So thank you very much. I'd like to touch on now how all of this can be brought together for doing evaluation for yourselves, for doing personal and scholastic research, and for helping others do research with Wikipedia. And what I hope you can take from the session today and the assignments that you'll have going forward is that it's not enough to evaluate the page and say, look at the references. That's just a beginning. What you can leverage is your understanding of Wikipedia as being this work in progress and as being a very nuanced, participatory media that is an online community. And so when you understand this, it adds an important level of nuance to the ways that you can use it for research and to help others. What I've hoped to emphasize to you today is that Wikipedia is not a monolith. There are many levels of development of articles, and there are articles on highly controversial topics that have achieved a great deal of stability, a plural, neutral viewpoint, and are extremely well organized. Featured articles are the example of this. But there are also articles that were created long ago that maybe haven't been updated and could use some attention. I looked to this wonderful website that makes ambient noise out of ongoing Wikipedia edits happening at any point. We just sent that link out to you, and this screenshot shows that when I looked at Listen to Wikipedia a couple of days ago, someone made an edit to Roseville Public Library, and that's how I discovered that there was indeed an article for this public library, and in fact the only reference for this public library when the page was created at least 10 years ago was the library's own website. And I think all of you now understand that that is actually not a notable source. That's not a verifiable source. It's not independent from the library, and it's not from a secondary source. So there's room for improvement in Wikipedia, and it's certainly not a monolith. The spirit of the pillars and the policies and the guidelines are there to guide people as they join to make contributions. And knowing that Wikipedia is embedded in the internet, where many people go on a daily basis, will help you teach really crucial information literacies and digital literacies. When people go online, they're engaging in information seeking in a very different way than when they go to the library. And so you need to learn how to evaluate really subtle signs and signals and communicative practices that take place. And understanding this about how people make decisions on Wikipedia will help you do that in a better way. So I want to thank you for this portion of the session, and now I think we can move into our next steps.
Great. Lots of rich and deep information being offered by the presenters and also shared in chat. Emphasizing what I said at the beginning, there is quite a range of levels of experience, and I encourage you to absorb what you are ready to absorb. There are a lot of links that will lead you to explanations of many of the side topics that came up about Wikipedia, and just more evidence that this is a very complex, nuanced, just as Monica said, not monolithic. I think one of the things that really hit home for me is seeing Wikipedia articles in all stages of development. So it's not the monolith you can say Wikipedia is totally reliable, nor can you say on the other side there's nothing reliable about it. It's really recognizing those stages of development, following all those signs that we heard about, and ways to evaluate each article, and also for all of us being bold and getting ready to dive in and engage with it and strengthen it ourselves. A lot of things, fortunately, chat is captured, so you can go back and revisit some of those discussions that were happening. And we are recording this, so you can go back and listen to any parts that you missed, and know that in the archive recording, you can fast forward, so you don't have to sit there and listen to the whole 90 minutes. You can get right to the part that you want to revisit. So looking forward to next week, we have some assignments to follow up with after what you heard today, and these are around evaluating Wikipedia articles. So we have selected 5 articles, and we asked for you to choose 2 from the list and assess the reliability and usefulness of each of those 2, and then suggest ways to improve the articles. And once you've done that for yourself, go to your discussion group, which it will be the only link that you see in section 2 in your view, and post your reviews in that forum, and please read other people's reviews, because this is where to have a conversation. And I think this is also because we now have so much more information about the workings of how articles are put together and how you look at those criteria for evaluation. I think this is going to open up some really rich conversation, which we will reflect upon and share back next week at our next live session. And again, we have wonderful Wikipedia guides. You will have a new guide. You'll be with your same discussion group as you were last week, but you will have a different guide who will be observing and monitoring your discussion, so you get a little bit of exposure to everybody. We admit it, everybody has their own point of view and their own perceptions, but it's good to mix it up. So I think that's it for today. Any questions that we can answer in 1 minute? I think
I am not. I did see if you're supposed to put the assignments on the top pages of the articles or put them in the forums. And we invite you to discuss and post your reviews in the forums. This is an opportunity for you to use the signs and signals that we've brought to you today and discuss with your colleagues in the forums about these articles. And of course, you can suggest ways to improve the articles, and if you want to take that next step and post on the top page, you know, we welcome you to dive in. For the purposes of the course, the idea is to have this be a discussion where you may find, you know, you're learning from the evaluations that your colleagues are doing, and we hope that the discussion process will help you learn and grow in the kind of safe, quiet space of our course. Maybe not quiet. You have been very busy and talkative, and this is wonderful.
Yes, I think differentiating our course page within Web Junction is the space that's private to this learning community, and it hopefully will support your feeling of confidence in talking to each other and learning as you go. And then once you venture into Wikipedia, everything you do there is very transparent, very public. So we have those two communities that we're holding in balance. And as somebody said, this is a lot to digest, so I encourage you, like, digest as much as you can at this point and seek support from your peers and from your Wikipedia guides in the discussion groups, and we will see you online live a week from today.
Goodbye. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Yana.